Good afternoon to you. Mark Sudduth, HurricaneTrack.com here. It is now Tuesday, the 11th day of July, 2023. Time for our discussion of the tropics and other tidbits related to weather, impactful weather. Of course, the big news yesterday and into today, for the United States anyway, is the tremendous flooding in parts of New England, especially in Vermont. The moderate and then high risk of flooding was set up there. It all came to pass, just a terrible situation, reminiscent and even exceeding what we saw in Hurricane Irene back in 2011. Deep, heartfelt, warm sympathies, everything going up to the folks in that part of our country dealing with these floodwaters. I saw where the governor had to use snowmobile trails to get out of where he lives to get to the emergency operations center or the disaster center, whatever they call it. Just a bad situation, and it shows you what water can do. Water is a very powerful element on this planet. It really is. It gives us life, but it can also be very destructive at the same time. So please keep that in mind. It's that balance between the two that we as mere humans are always trying to figure out and deal with and adapt to. All right, there's my preamble. Let's get on with it, shall we? A few areas to watch in the Atlantic, including 94L. And we'll get into all that, all right? Let's start off here. There's 94L. 30% chance of development over the next 48 hours. 50% chance, so get out your coins. And you can flip them, I guess, is 50-50, right? Over the next 168 hours or a week. And then as our thumbnail showed, this is the development area. And just for reference, there's Bermuda right there, so no worries for Bermuda. This would be only of interest to shipping lanes, whatever shipping lanes are out in this part of the Atlantic. And I don't even think this will be a big wave generator. Maybe if it does strengthen some, it could create some waves that will eventually impact parts of Atlantic Canada, maybe the east-facing beaches of Bermuda, and perhaps that long period swell could reach the east coast of the U.S. and the northern coast of parts of the Caribbean islands. But let's wait and see what, if anything, this feature ends up doing, how strong it gets, how organized, that kind of thing. 93E out here, gone. That didn't develop into anything. And you remember, it was up to 90% chance of development. You may remember, I do, and it didn't develop. I laugh because, hey, I thought the Pacific was supposed to be on fire this year with the El Nino and lots of hurricanes and lots of shear going across the Atlantic. Yeah, we do have some shear out there, but it's not being caused by Pacific hurricanes. That is for sure, because we don't have any right now. But we do have this next area, 94E, and hey, it's at 90% chance on the 2 and 7 day forecast there. This will probably go on to develop, and as I pointed out yesterday, that's mainly because it's going to ride pretty far to the south relative to 93E, and so it'll stay in warmer water and thus a more favorable environment overall. We shall see. And then there's probably going to be more that tries to develop later on coming out of this area in the days to come as a more active pattern starts to set up. But nothing serious, nothing threatening Mexico, so that certainly is great to see. All right, here's what it looks like on the satellite animation, courtesy of TropicalTidbits.com. There's the disturbance that's 94L in the Atlantic. This is a front that's coming off, and then the leftover energy finally getting out of New England up there. Hopefully people can dry out and start to pick up the pieces from that terrible situation. Not only just Vermont, but parts of the rest of the area, even into Massachusetts, parts of Connecticut, some of those rivers running pretty high. And then, of course, we saw it in Pennsylvania and even the Hudson Valley region of New York. Elsewhere, though, down in the tropics, some Saharan dust out here. But as I keep saying, it's not very prevalent. It's not really thick. It's not jaw-dropping. We do have some shear. You can clearly see the shear stretching these clouds out here like cotton candy, which, of course, would be gone within seconds probably in this kind of summer heat around here. But, yeah, the wind shear pretty prevalent across the tropical Atlantic right now, fairly typical of what we would expect to see in the month of July. Moving on to the west to the floater, or not the floater, it's just the section, whatever it is that Levi calls it over here, the extent. It's the Southeast Pacific, let's just say that. There's Invest 94E, we'll put the E in there, I'll try to anyway. And it looks a little bit better organized overall. Some clusters of thunderstorms here rotating around a common low pressure area. And this should go on to develop, I don't see why not. By the way, There's the leftovers of 93E. A big old wah, wah. That just didn't do anything. Ran into that colder water that's right over here. And yeah, I mean, you can almost see that line there. I drew it in, but the delineation between the warm tropical water over here and the colder, what we associate with the negative PDO, the Pacific Decadal Oscillation, is pretty easy to see. And then look at all of this low stratocumulus cloud deck. If you're on a boat out here and you're looking up, I bet that sky is just amazing to see, even as boring as it might look overall, that layer of just very stable atmosphere. All right, looking at the vorticity signature, one of my favorite tools as we try to pick out areas that could become problematic. There is 94L in the Atlantic. This is some energy that's worked its way off the southeast coast. Sometimes these features can try to develop. You never know. Models and whatnot really picking up on that. There's a tropical wave, some energy coming through parts of the windwards and leewards, and then there's that energy exiting, finally, slowly doing so, New England. There's 93E in the East Pac, dying away, of course. X93E, I should say, right? And then 94E over there. And there's some energy coming off Africa. A little bit more in the way of these vorticity signatures that I look for starting to become more prevalent, and that's going to be the case as we get further and further along on the timeline of July. And as we get towards the end of July, we should see a more favorable widespread upward motion pattern set up, the MJO coming through, maybe some convectively coupled Kelvin waves, just smaller periods of time. And on the Earth itself, these little areas, almost like I say often, a shot of Red Bull to the tropics, where a couple of days after these Kelvin waves pass through, what's left in their wake is a favorable environment. So that's all coming, it looks like, once we get past about mid-July. And July, climatologically, is a very quiet month. Higher pressures normally in the Atlantic, the Saharan air layer outbreaks, we still have the shear, and the subtropical jet tries to dip south from time to time. That's why we don't have a lot of hurricanes in July. Makes sense, doesn't it? Climatology. Use it, and use it wisely, because it can be very helpful. All right, so let's look over at Levi's site again, Dr. Cowan's TropicalTidbits.com, at the dashboard of the different features. We have 94, 90, 294s, and then way out in the West Pac. You know what? Let's just look at that real quick. Don't want to ignore it. It is in the Western Pacific. The GEFS, the Ensemble Forecast System of the GFS, developing this east of the Philippines, and then it looks like a ridge tries to build in. That would be my guess, right? Bends it back towards mainland China, maybe just north and east of Taiwan. We will be watching and seeing how that transpires over time. Now back to the Western Hemisphere. There's 94L. The satellite shot of it, a close-up, looking kind of disorganized. And then some of the early track guidance, not a lot of it. Hey, it's almost useless right now because we don't have a low-level center, but this just gives you an idea. It's a big mess, like really. So don't even worry about it. We'll check back with this in a few days. Intensity guidance, not much happening with it. Overall, the water temperatures where it's located, way out in the Atlantic there, the subtropical Atlantic, water temperatures marginal at best, and so I wouldn't put too much worry at all or thought into that system. And then just looking real quick at 94E in the East Pac, hey, that is a tight cluster of model guidance. You love to see it. I don't care what the situation is, even if it's a hurricane coming at you, that's what you want to see, because that means it is a dependable forecast. That is what agreement generally looks like, and even way out in the longer time periods, days 4 and 5, you don't have a huge spread. You don't have them going like this and like that and whatever. Right? Right. That's what that looks like when you have model agreement. And then the intensity guidance, this one should become a hurricane. We'll see. It should, I mean, come on. It's going to be in warmer water. I think it'll avoid that cooler, stable air mass to the north and northwest. So this will probably be the next hurricane in the eastern Pacific. All right, so a few odds and ends here. The daily look at the SOI, when this turns negative again, and strongly so, then the El Nino progression shall resume. That is my opinion. That's the way I look at it. They're relatively correlated. I mean, yes, a strongly negative SOI is associated with an El Nino, but cause and effect, I mean, sometimes It can be that these SOI drops first as an indicator that we're going to get more westerly winds. The bottom line, I like looking at this because it's literally a good barometer of how the pressure pattern is across the tropical Pacific. Today's contributor still positive, 30-day coming down again just because these numbers are getting smaller too. But even the 90-day, that -7 that the Bureau of Meteorology, right up here, Queensland government out of Australia, they've been watching this a long time, folks. They really have. And we're not at that -7 yet. So the El Nino is basically on pause for the most part. Showed you this yesterday as part of my rundown of some of the different climate models. This was the Euro, the C3S. This is Andrew Moore had tweeted this. And remember, we talked about this guidance here. I'm going to click on it, kind of indicating, let's use blue to make it stand out. The precipitation anomalies down in the main development region, pretty solid there, suggesting a robust peak to the hurricane season. Now, what about other model guidance? Well, I'm glad you asked, because today, even the typically bearish and usually skeptical Andy Hazelton says the July UK Met, that's the UK Met office out of England, precipitation forecast certainly stands out compared to recent July positive INSO, in other words, El Nino forecast, during El Nino years. I'm just kind of putting words in his tweet, so to speak, both in the Pacific and the Atlantic, right? Definitely the forecasts that he's talking about are interesting. Whether that translates into more Atlantic tropical cyclones remains to be seen, but definitely interesting to see the climate models go all in. That's about as, I don't want to say positive, because we don't need hurricanes to do the destruction that they do, but they are a vital part of the Earth's regulatory system for heat and heat budget and all that. But it is interesting to see Andy kind of saying, okay, maybe a little bit more tipping the scales towards possibly a busier season than we were anticipating. And then I'm going to use black to outline this. There's your precip anomaly off the UK Met, a pretty big area there in the eastern Atlantic. Probably going to get a lot of ACE out here. And then another little bullseye, if you will. Hey, that's near where I live, right there. Yeah, so we got to watch this. This isn't verbatim. And a good friend of ours that I often hear from on Twitter through direct messaging, he's also very prominently posting over at Storm 2K, Adrian down in southeast Florida, made mention, and this is important, that no, this isn't going to catch individual tracks. That's impossible. I think it really is impossible, even 50 years from now. I mean, hey, you never know. An example would be Irma in 2017. The climate models didn't see Irma. They certainly did not see, as an example, Ian last year or Fiona necessarily. It's the overall look. Kind of like saying, okay, and again, a quick sports analogy. It's just easy for people to digest this. We have a really loaded team this year, whatever it may be, basketball, baseball, football, hockey. Wow, loaded for bear, lots of talent. Are they going to beat so-and-so, their big rival? Well, we don't know that. Those are the details that have to be played out for the season. You understand? Individual games, NBA as an example, you got a loaded team. Are they going to do well against the other kind of loaded team? Don't know. Got to wait and see, but boy, the talent seems to be there. That's what this is like. The climate model suggesting that everything is loaded for a very busy time period, and that would be August, September, and into October. And we'll just have to see individual storm tracks and where they end up. Have no idea. No idea at this point in time. I mean, look at Ian, for goodness sakes, even 3 days out. People in Tampa up to Cedar Key, very much under threat, and it turns out it made landfall down there near Sanibel Island. Wow, that's just 72 hours. We're talking 3 months of time period here, August through October. All right. Again, a reminder, I'm telling you what, I think this is a great thing that Patreon has done. It makes Patreon more like regular social media, where anybody can be a part of it and conversate and engage, and then when they wish to become a supporter financially, they can do so. And the creator, in this case, that's me, and our back-end team, the whole group at HurricaneTrack, we are all still in charge of it. We don't have a tech billionaire somewhere calling all the shots. I think that is really awesome. And it's just, so yeah, check it out. You can sign in. I believe they got it now through your Facebook or Google, or you can just sign up through Patreon. And I'm going to make all of our posts going forward, and I've done this the last couple of days, they will be publicly available. So you don't have to pay $4 or $10 until we have something that adds that value, where we say, hey, look, we need your help. We've got this amazing setup. Come and help support it financially, and then you can dial it back as you need to. A great thing, and I'm going to talk about it a lot. Go to patreon.com/HurricaneTrack or get their app, and you're good to go. And then, by the way, once you're on, yes, we do have a lot of amazing stuff on there. In-depth coverage, and especially when we have storms going on, access to our Discord, our live cams, exclusive podcast episodes, stories from the Hurricane Highway, our unbelievable, I mean, they really are amazing interactive maps, and more. You like that, right? And more. But wait, there's more. There really is. And then you can join it. It doesn't cost you anything just to get on board. And then when the time comes, you can support it however your budget allows. A tremendous positive move by Patreon. I applaud that very much. That's great. And hopefully the other creators out there, whether they are in weather or podcast or movies or anything else they're doing artistic, you name it, it's on Patreon. I think the other creators would probably agree. This is a good move. I like it. All right, let's get this online for you. And, of course, it goes on to Patreon and YouTube almost at the same time. So pick your one. Whatever you want to watch it on, it's there. As always, either way, thank you for tuning in. I'm Mark Sudduth, Hurricane Track. I'll be back with more for you tomorrow.